Never stop learning and never stop improving. I think about what happens with other players in the music business as like when you're at the airport and you've got those people movers.
Yes.
They're always moving. They're always moving forward. So even if you think you're standing in the same place and you're holding your ground, in actuality, you're losing ground.
Jim, we're together again. I've had some great times with you in the course of my travels, traveling throughout Europe with you and performing and playing. And what is so intense, you are an energy in not only in the drumming industry, but in the music industry. You really are a strong push for what is needed now in the music industry. I mean, not only as a drummer playing, but also as a band leader on the road with Rascal Flatts. This has got to be a whole other intense level of what you're going through and what you have to be prepared for.
Yeah.
And who knows how you even prepared for all of that. But it's great to have you here for the sessions. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
Tell me where it began for you with music and drumming.
I started playing drums when I was 11 years old, but it really started a lot earlier than that. It was an idea that I had really that predates my memories. Like from my earliest memories, I wanted to be a musician even before I knew what instrument I wanted to play. I was in kindergarten and they used to make these little mimeograph booklets, and they had all of the kids say what they wanted to be when they grew up. And in kindergarten, I still have it, I said that I wanted to be a musician, and at that time I didn't even play an instrument. I started playing guitar when I was in about the 3rd or 4th grade, and long story short, it really didn't click with me. And then I saw an ad, and that ad I later realized was an ad for Kiss Alive 2. And it was Peter Criss on this giant drum set on this riser that was just like going up to the rafters. And I said, that's the job that I want. So I begged my parents to let me play. In the 4th grade, they said no, because you got issues, kid. So we're not adding this to it. 5th grade, I said, please let me play drums. And they said, no way. By 6th grade, I hadn't stopped asking. They said, well, whatever's wrong with this kid isn't gonna be fixed by not letting him play drums. So let's put some drumsticks in his hands. They let me start studying drums, and that was really the beginning of it. About that time, I was also in a really great youth choir, so I was singing and I was playing drums, and I was kind of starting my musical journey that way.
Interesting. So is there anyone else in your family that plays music?
My grandfather was a hobbyist musician. He played fiddle, he played harmonica, and I was very interested to, kind of sit at the foot of his bed and listen to that. My uncle, his son, played some guitar. He actually tried to teach me guitar as a grade school kid. And then later, when I started playing drums, he brought his friends over to our house in the suburbs, and that was the first band I was ever playing with, was with my uncle.
How beautiful! And
he was taking me out on little party gigs and stuff. So it was fun. I was 11, 12 years old playing with a bunch of 30-year-old guys having a great time.
Did you start now learning the instrument? Did you start taking lessons? Was that a part of it?
I did. My first teacher was a guy named Lenny Clayton, and he put sticks in my hands, and we were learning snare drum, and then he quickly passed me along to another guy who kind of quickly passed me along to another guy, and I ended up studying for about 4 years with Arthur Press, who was one of the principal percussionists for the Boston Symphony.
Absolutely, yeah.
And Arthur was there with Vic Firth, who was the timpanist for the Boston Symphony for 50 years, and Tom Gager, who teaches at Boston University and was also in the orchestra. So it was a really neat time to be studying percussion in the Boston area. Along with, of course, Neil Grover, who still plays with the Boston Symphony and makes a lot of great instruments. All of those guys, except for Arthur, got into manufacturing some really elite instruments based on their own careers.
Absolutely, and Neil, who is from Long Island, where I'm from, we studied with the same teacher, Ronnie Benedict, many years ago, so I'll go back many years with Neil. These are great musicians that you have been around, and again, the fact that they got involved with manufacturing product also on top of the fact of being great players and
Yeah.
great teachers.
Absolutely.
So there were many hats that they wore. So you're playing, you're learning now. When did your first professional opportunities happen where you started to realize this is what I want to do full
Well,
time?
I knew from a very early age that this was what I wanted to do. So anything I was doing in supplement to that was never like a plan B. It was never a backup plan. It was always stuff I wanted to do in addition to being a performer. I guess my first professional gigs where I was playing with a community theater not far from where I grew up. And I remember my parents were taking my younger sister to Disney World, and I actually turned down a trip to go to Disney World to play shows that summer at the community theater. It was something I was always driven to do, and I ended up graduating from high school in 1987 and going to University of North Texas, which was a really transformative time in my life.
I remember when you were there. I had met you. I was performing there and did many clinics there, and you were a student there. And it's just great to see that you went to some real formalized learning.
Yeah.
And there were some great teachers there, Ed Sof and so many great educators.
It was Ed's first semester at North Texas as on staff as the drum guy, and everybody was very, very excited to have Ed, because Ed is the kind of teacher that talks the talk and walks the walk.
Absolutely.
You know, there are some people that are great at teaching. There are some people that are great at playing, and he's just one of these guys that is just brilliant at both. Very intimidating. He still intimidates me, you know. But a
beautiful person.
He's really wonderful,
and
really
very
wonderful
inspired.
person.
When you're around Ed, it's really very inspiring because his wisdom is just so profound and very helpful.
He's fantastic. It was also the era. Dr. Shatroma was, continuing to build his amazing program at the University of North Texas. You know, a great music program might have from 10 or 15 percussion music majors. At the time I was there at North Texas, we had 200 percussion music majors. It's an amazingly large group there. But there was also, the quality was really fantastic. The quality of the people and the players that were there were phenomenal. I mean, guys like Keith Carlock and some guys that some younger guys, Jason Sutter and Rich Redmond, who were my age. Countless guys that are now, guys and girls that are music educators all over the country. So it's been interesting for me to be able to reconnect with a bunch of the people that I went to college with now that they have their own programs around the country.
How beautiful, how beautiful. So all those years of learning, how did that lead to Rascal Flatts? Because here you are playing drums and now as a band leader, that's several hats that you're wearing.
Well, I always understood the importance of the street smarts aspect of it. I think there's what happens in school and there's what happens when you take what you learn in school and you apply it out there in the field. I was always one to want to be proactive, to play gigs, to create gigs. Growing up in Massachusetts, I didn't have a lot of exposure to country music, but being in Texas, there was a lot more country music. And then given the era that I was entering into my professional career in the early 90s, country was very popular. That was the time where Garth Brooks was really exploding and becoming this just force of nature that he still is. I got very interested in country music because I saw that there was a lot of work in it. I started playing some country gigs around Dallas, and among other gigs that I was playing, about that time was the day that we met was the day that I met Larry London, who was one of the most prolific recording drummers in Nashville's history, and certainly has a history of recording with everybody from Adrian Belew to playing on the Journey's Raised on Radio record and Steve Perry's Backtalk record, and had played with Elvis and just done amazing
brilliant things that Larry did.
And it was playing on every record for about 20 years in Nashville. And so I was very interested, and he was very kind in giving me a lot of advice about moving to Nashville. I decided to move in 1997. I lived in Kansas City for about 2 years before that, and it was interesting because I was working at a drum manufacturing shop. So I was learning about manufacturing drums, I was learning retail, And on the weekends, I was playing in this country band. I was this young guy playing with a bunch of older guys, and I was getting a country music education. So when I finally decided to move to Nashville, I may have looked like a rocker with long hair and a beard, but I obviously knew the music. And I think that this is a really important point, is I come across some players, some jazz players really, that they figure if I could play jazz, I can play anything. And I'm going, well, I understand what you're trying to say, but in order to master any style of music, you first have to respect that music. Then, given the fact that you respect it, you have to study that music. You have to study it like you study any other type of music. You have to listen to the greats that came before you. And I felt like I've been a really good student of country music. So when I came to Nashville, people understood that I may not have looked the part, but I certainly sounded the part. I had respect for the music, and so I got hired very quickly to play a lot of local gigs, not too far from where we are right here in Music City today.
Oh, great.
It was through some of those local gigs that I ended up landing some of the national gigs that I landed. I started playing with a guy named Mark Chestnut, who in the 90s was had 13 #1 hits, was a very successful country artist. But his best days had already come before I'd been there. The glory days had already happened. So I said, wouldn't it be great if I could possibly be fortunate enough to try to get with an act and go through the whole journey? And I got very fortunate that some very talented friends of mine landed a record deal, and they asked me if I would come out and play with them. And at the time I had a better job, but I saw a tremendous upside with what these guys were doing, so I decided to take a risk. 18 years later, I'm still with Rascal Flatts. I went out the first year with them, and after the first year they said, we're not making any personnel changes, but we would like you to take over the job as band leader because we feel like you understand our vision for what the band is supposed to be like. And I guess it's been a good choice because I've been a person that's been able to provide continuity over the past 18 years. I like to joke, it's true, but it's still funny. Gary is, it's a corporation. So Gary is the president, Jay is the vice president, Joe Don is the secretary treasurer. Gary is employee number 1, Jay is employee number 2, Joe Don is number 3. And I am literally, as I get my paycheck, I am employee number 4. So I've been there a long time. They've been wonderful to me, and the job of band leader and musical directing has been a really fun one to grow with over the years.
And what does that mean as far as being a band leader? What are some of the responsibilities?
It's things like making sure that the band guys that we've hired are ready to go. It could be things as simple as making sure that we're taking this song down a half step, and that I'm assigning, we have multi-instrumentalists, so I'm making sure that we've got the right people playing the right instruments to try to represent what we want to represent. Later it became I'm hiring musicians. Occasionally I have let musicians go, which is very unpleasant. I run rehearsals. I have grown into different positions where if we're playing on like a music festival, I'll get the files and I'll be able to, comb through them. And if, someone made a little mistake, I can go through it with the engineer and, offer suggestions to fix and tighten up things. Even on the last record, they called me, they said, hey, will you write the charts? So I wrote the charts for the songs that we were recording, and it's kind of a catch-all for the guy that is their main contact in the band. They want to know that everything with the band is taken care of, and so I've been that guy.
It's a large responsibility, but you have done great with it. And what's amazing is that you've performed everywhere: the Grammy Awards, the Tonight Show, the American Music Awards, The Voice, American Idol, Oprah, the Today Show. You've really gotten around performing with this band. And with all that intensity and craziness, then you got involved in teaching. Tell me a little bit about the drum dojo that you have, that you are involved with teaching students.
I've always had a passion for teaching. I started teaching as early as people would let me teach. As a matter of fact, in high school, my director, Jerry Ash, God rest his soul, he's a wonderful musician. He realized dealing with me at that age was challenging. And one of the things that he figured out worked was if you gave me more responsibility, I actually behaved significantly better than if I had less to do. So he had me teaching the drum line. He had me, teaching, going down to the middle school and teaching. And I discovered a passion for teaching that's never stopped. So when I was at North Texas, my major was a music education major. I graduated with my degree in music education. My first job out of college was actually as a teacher for the Capel Independent School District in Texas. And I did that job where I was the percussion specialist and was a kind of an assistant band director that would teach beginner classes, and I would teach sectionals, and I would teach the drum line. I enjoyed that, but the problem was I knew that was going to keep me away from my ultimate goal of trying to be a professional on a very high level. So I quit that job, much to my mother's dismay, because she loved that I was a teacher, and I started to pursue my career as a musician. But as I've become more successful as a musician, I've been able to put myself in a position to get back to teaching. So for the last 11 years, I have had a studio at my home that I call the Drum Dojo, and I teach everyone from private students that come and take lessons with me to Skype lessons. But the main thing that I do there is I teach kids in group lessons from 6th grade to 12th grade, and I try to get them from not having sticks in their hands to being college ready. And the other thing that I do there is I do camps. So like this weekend, starting tomorrow, I have a drum camp at the house where I have, I might have from 5 to 7 people that are coming to study with me in a small group, and we're all behind drums with the central focus of just trying to get better as a musician and become a more marketable player.
Absolutely, and I have got students of mine that are coming to these camps that are going to it that I tell them, you gotta go and have some time with Jim.
Yeah.
They're excited about it and they'll see you soon. So the fact that you're doing this, and then you got involved with writing books.
Yeah.
The Song Charts Made Easy, that you have the Survival Guide to the Modern Drummer. I mean, and the Survival Guide, this is best drum book voted, Drum Magazine. This is amazing that you've accomplished now educational material at such a high level on top of all that you're doing.
Well, I'm really glad that I didn't get into writing books sooner, because the place that I was at, I felt like I finally had something that I wanted to say. For me, it's all about trying to contribute to the music community. Yeah. And with you and I, we have a passion for the drummers, and we want to try to help them. Like where we've been successful, we want to try to help them do the same thing. Right. With my first book, the way that happened was I wrote an article for Modern Drummer. It was a 2-part article on the Nashville number system, and they loved it, and it was responded to really well.
And the Nashville number system, just to explain, is the system that is used pretty much solely here in Nashville as far as a chart reading system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is, but it's based on very universal musical principles. I mean, these are the same principles that Bach was using. Right. And basically, to oversimplify it, the number system is this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So if I'm thinking 1, 4, 6, 5. So what happened with the number system is the Jordanaires, Elvis's singers, they were flashing numbers as in the sessions on their 3-part harmonies, and the musicians went, that's a good idea. And so they started writing these numbers down, 1 number per bar. And so, as an educated musician, when I came to Nashville, I mean, I'd studied figured bass and I'd studied Roman numeral analysis. And then I saw these guys using numbers in this way, and I went, wow, this is taking the information that I learned in college and actually giving it a practical use. And I realized that there was not enough books on the subject. Right. So after I wrote that article for Modern Drummer, I pitched the idea of doing a book to Hal Leonard. Hal Leonard had published the first book, by Neil Matthews Jr., one of the Jordanaires, that was really a passion project that said, you have to write this book. So he wrote the first book on the subject. So they were familiar with it, and they said, yeah, we'd love to have you write this book. So I wrote that book, and I'm constantly meeting musicians, guitar players, bass players, drummers, keyboard players, that say thank you because you put this information in a really concise, simple package. They said, that book wasn't hard at all. I said, it wasn't supposed to be hard, it's supposed to be useful. So that was my first book, and as soon as I got done with that book, I said, you know, I'm a glutton for punishment. Let me write another one. So I wrote my first drum set book, and that's Survival Guide for the Modern Drummer. And that's a styles book. And there's a history of styles books. And so I knew, knowing the people and the products that have been put out there, that I had to really step it up if I wanted to do something that was going to contribute in a way that made it worthy of buying with the books that were already out there. So what I decided, I said, I'm gonna try to cover all styles. And when I say all styles, I'm not doing the traditional, we're gonna do jazz and rock and Latin and funk. I said, you know, yes, I'm gonna do those, but I'm also gonna do country. I'm also gonna do metal. I'm also gonna spend time on some odd times. I'm also gonna spend time on some world styles that don't get talked about as much. Basically, I wanted to give drummers a tool to be able to survive in the real world. And so I took the collection of my real world experience of being a drum set player, and I decided to write this book covering all these styles. The most important thing for me was to make sure that I got the music right. So I spent 2 entire years doing nothing but the music tracks. I spent 2 years with over 40 musicians in locations all over the world working on this music to make sure that I had country specialist players playing on the country, blues players on the blues, metal players on the metal, you know, jazz players on the jazz, people that worked in Cuban music to play on that Cuban music. That book has done really well, and it warms my heart to see that people around the world have embraced it as a new text for just trying to become a better player.
Oh, it really has. And the songs are fun to play, the students enjoy them, so it really has brought out a whole nother level of education of play-along material, which is really authentic. You really hit the nail on the head on that one.
I appreciate that. You had to be crazy to do what I did, because you know, to spend 2 years on just the music, it's 124 tracks. So just think of it like doing 12 solo albums at the same time, and you'll kind of get the idea.
Right. In just a short 2-year time. That's exactly right.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. Well, you've done an incredible job, and what's amazing is all these different hats that you wear, from drummer to band leader to performing on all different sessions around the world as a session player, to teaching, to writing books as an author. This session is about trying to get this next generation to see that we need to do more things in our life and reach out. So in closing, what would you say to this next generation on what they can do to be prepared to have a life in the music industry as inspired as yours?
Well, the first thing is to never stop learning and never stop improving. I think about what happens with other players in the music business as like when you're at the airport and you got those people movers. They're always moving. They're always moving forward. So even if you think you're standing in the same place and you're holding your ground, in actuality, you're losing ground. You always have to be getting better. I've decided I'm learning some new things. So my New Year's resolution was, listen, I've recorded my whole life, but I've never had a recording rig at my house to be able to do drum tracks at home. So I said, I'm gonna commit myself to learn Pro Tools, to learn Logic, to be able to do that. And so that was my New Year's resolution. I bought a couple of Apollo 8P preamps, so I've got 16 channels of inputs. I've got brand new computer and got a subscription to Pro Tools, which isn't cheap, which means that I've got to make money doing this.
Interesting.
So that's one of the things that I've been doing lately is I've now been recording drum tracks for people around the world. Just in the short time I've been doing it, I've done tracks for people in China, Japan, Austria, Hungary, Germany, and right here in America. But that's just one thing. The one thing I would really recommend is to diversify, to make sure that if Like, if you love music the way that I love music, that's all I want to do. I don't want to do other things. So I find a ton of different ways to express myself in this way. So I perform with Rascal Flatts, but I also play local gigs just to keep sharp. Good. It's not for the money, it's because I love playing music and because I'm always meeting new people. I've met some great new musicians last night. And I'm hoping that those are going to make some really nice connections in the future. I write music. I write about music. I'm doing an article series for Modern Drummer right now. I'm on my third one. The first one's going to be coming out soon. So for me, like, my key to happiness has never been about the money. It's been about the fact that I can support my family just, playing music, writing music, teaching music, writing about music. Those are the things that I like to do. And that's what I spend my time doing. So for me, if I can provide for my family and just doing that, then that's how I judge my success. And so if you have a passion for music, be an entrepreneur, get deep into this. Don't wait for gigs to happen for you, create them on your own. Always be moving forward. Don't ever feel like you're good enough now. I mean, continue to learn and continue to get better, and people will see your passion for this.
Well, you are a constant student, because just in the years that I've known you, I've seen you change and develop and grow, and you're constantly pushing yourself. And with all that you have done, you really are an amazing positive force in the drumming industry and the music industry. So
I've always said, when I grow up, I want to be you.
Well, you are surpassing for sure. So continued success, Jim. Thank you so much. On behalf of the sessions, it's great to have you here. Thank you so much.